Guys, we got Moose Mutlow.
He's a search and rescue operator coming up right now.
Hello, everybody. This is Derek, and with me today is the only man to arm wrestle a marmot and lose, Carl Mandrioli, weak shoulders and biceps. How you doing, buddy?
I can't beat anybody arm wrestling.
You gotta hit the gym. You gotta hit the gym.
I know. Yeah, just for that, just to beat marmots. Welcome to the Backpack Bushes podcast, everybody. With me today is Derek Somerville. He's the only one who didn't clap when the boy was rescued from the porta potty because he was waiting to see if the boy found his phone.
Wow. Okay. That was a stretch.
Yeah. Rescue. It's about rescue. Search and rescue.
No, I got it. It just kind of. I was waiting for that big funny punchline. Just kind of did one of those. But you know what? We're here. We're here to talk about search and rescue, not your jokes. So Marmot. I love this guy's name, by the way.
Marmot.
Yeah, Marmot. I'm kidding. Moose. Come on, man. Moose. What am I saying, Marmot?
It's another M animal, so not too far off.
I got you arm wrestling. I got you arm wrestling a marmot on my head.
Yeah.
I can't. That's all.
Well, what we're talking about, like, how common is it for people to be called by animal names as like their first name? You got Bear Grylls. What else you got?
That's about it.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I don't know. Anyway, Moose Marmot. Moose
Jake the Snake Roberts.
Jake the Snake. That's not his first name though.
Correct.
I don't know.
Anyway, so we've got possibly the best search and rescue interview ever coming up.
I'm excited.
Ever. Yeah.
Ever.
So
in the history.
Yeah.
Who ranks this, by the way? Do you rank this?
I do. Yeah. I'm kind of on top of the rankings and grading.
Not surprised.
Stuff. Yeah.
Not surprised. Do you rank your own jokes as well? Is that something you do?
I kind of leave that to you. You're pretty good at that. So
somebody's got it.
Anyway, I asked everything I could think of, and I still feel like I scratched the surface, but I covered a lot of ground with this one, with our interview with Moose Mutlow, which we're going to have here in a moment. But before we get to that, like, what would you have asked him? He's from Yosemite. He does search and rescue. He's had, he's been a street performer. He's got all sorts of crazy life stories. Yeah.
He's
lived in Africa, Australia. He's from Great Britain originally, like all over the place.
I mean, what? There's so many things you could ask a guy like that. I mean,
give me one.
Did he do the Lord of the Rings trail, or the little search and rescue thing that you can do when you go to New Zealand? Did he do that? I don't know.
I didn't say he went to New Zealand, but
he's been everywhere. So let's ask him.
Yeah.
I mean,
there was
he
rescued a
bear? Has he rescued a bear from people?
There was a Lord of the Rings reference he made that I didn't pick up on until we started chatting afterwards about it. That actually relates to my search and rescue story. So we'll get to that. Yeah.
Oh,
so
okay.
Not too far off.
All
right. We got our Bible verse of the episode is Galatians 6:2. Carry each other's burdens, and in this way you can fulfill the law of Christ. Derek, is carrying each other's burdens a strength of yours, in your opinion?
Carrying each other's am I carrying your burdens?
I mean, I'd like mine. You don't care about me, so that doesn't make sense.
That's true. I would like to think that I'm a good listening ear to people's issues and to carry that burden with them, suffer along. Yeah, I'd like to think so. That's not really for me to judge, Carol. It's for other people to kind of make that determination. What would you say? Can I carry burdens?
Is that a strength? I'd say no. But I would say it's not a strength of a lot of people's
to carry burdens of others.
I just think
that's a hard one.
I think people are really good at sharing their burdens in general, but I think as I pay more and more attention, really since we've had the podcast, to kind of like social interactions, conversational skills, there's a lot of people and their conversational stuff. I'm not saying this is yours, but just in general, they just unload. They can just talk and they can just go.
That's true.
And that's the opposite of that. Now you're definitely not that person, but I just think in general, this is not something people are good at.
I think it can be challenging. I think if you're generalizing, I think, people like to talk about themselves in general. So I think it's a constant battle of let me close my mouth, say less, be a listener, and really try to empathize with the other person. So I think that's a skill everybody can get better at, especially you. So
I got a quick test for you. Quick test.
Oh, okay. Here we go.
I don't know if this is real. I just made it up. I'm not a professional in this area at all.
We know.
But
We know.
I would,
Okay.
if I would say, if somebody shares something personal with you, like a personal struggle they've got, maybe
Uh-huh.
they've got, it's gonna like something is upcoming that they're anxious about, or that
Uh-huh.
something's a big deal. They're gonna have a big conversation with a spouse or with a lawyer or something, and they share that with you. Do you then follow up a couple days later to find out how it went, like unprompted?
Unprompted. I
Yeah.
think I have, and I think I've also
Okay.
messed that up. So
I think most people don't. Is my thought there.
I mean, I know I followed up with 2 or 3 people about just that type of stuff this week, but I've definitely dropped the ball on that for sure.
Okay.
Like if you
All right.
don't see
Well.
that person for a while, could I have called or texted? Probably, you know.
Yeah. Okay.
So,
Well.
but I like to think I'm
uh,
okay.
Yeah, we're getting too far into the weeds here. I think with Moose, he doesn't have to follow up because he's actually
Mm,
just in the spot
he's
where he's
there.
saving people out the gate. It's not like
Yeah.
something's upcoming. It's happened right now in
Right
front of
now.
his
Right now.
face. We're gonna hear all the stories. Here we go. With me today is a man who has been an outward bound instructor, a street performer, and since 2002, a member and senior trainer of Yosemite Search and Rescue. Moose Mutlow, how's it going today, sir?
It's great. Thank you very much. I'm happy to be along after a pretty robust training schedule this spring with Yosemite Search and Rescue.
Yes, yeah, and we appreciate everything you do as a trainer and training for that, because I'm sure there's been a lot of lives you saved and a lot of stories you have, and we're happy to jump into it. So I don't know how often you're meeting new folks in like social gatherings, but when people find out what you've been doing for a living, what's the most common question that you get?
Aren't you a bit old for that? Is a pretty typical one I get. It's
That's not a question. That's just judgment.
it is, but it's a good reminder. It's one of those things where experience speaks. Your longevity is based on incidents and varied experiences. And it definitely is a younger person game on the physicality. I can't go ripping up the Yosemite Falls Trail 2 or 3 times over a weekend and hauling
Right.
a litter like I used to.
Right.
I'm a bit more staid in my approach.
Okay. So yeah, Yosemite Falls Trail. That's like a 5 mile, 3,000 foot gain trail in Yosemite, correct?
Yeah, it's getting there. And
Yeah.
it has this narrowness and the windiness that it's if you're pulling someone down in a ladder, you're moving down with speed with a big wheel underneath and bouncing down the steps.
Yeah.
Uh, and you're doing it at night, you got to be on top of your game.
Hmm. I've encountered those folks in Yosemite that are doing that, where they're hiking in. I think it was in the Grand Canyon of Tuolumne a couple years ago when somebody had to get yanked out. So yeah, and they were moving. They were they were moving fast. So
And
that's interesting. That's a
that's
good.
one of the key pits is that a lot of times people have the idea that they're going to get this deluxe rescue with a helicopter, and it's not.
Right.
It's feet on the ground for the most part, especially at night when pumpkin time rolls around and you can't fly a helicopter because we don't have nighttime capability. You're coming out over several hours. If you're
Right.
lucky to come out that night, and you're not overnighting.
Right. Right. Yeah, and I've got some questions about like later on about the protocol for that type of stuff. So okay, let's see here. I've got a scenario for you, a little bit of a story here. So the year is 1996, and
Great
I'm
year.
floating down the river between the first and second drop of Yosemite Falls. So it's got 3 drops between the first and the second one. All right. I fly over a 10-foot section, so like a 10-foot kind of mini waterfall, and I'm headed quickly toward the next, I think it's like a 675-foot drop. So as I'm floating down there, at that point, what would you put my chances of survival to be?
Well, Middle Earth is the area you're talking about, and it's a series, as you know, of robust rocky drops into big pools. It would depend a
Right.
lot on your flows, but for the most part, if you're in the flow, you're going to go off the bottom drop, and it's an unsurvivable drop.
Okay. So I mean, I know it's different every year. This was like in mid to late June that year with probably
Okay.
average snow melt. Yeah. So it was flowing. It was going. Like the falls were going. It wasn't like, the mist coming off the top kind of thing. Okay. Yeah. So that was something that happened when I was like, before I got into hiking and backpacking. I was new to everything, and I was following some guys in, and yeah, I did get the helicopter rescue that day. So I did get the the guys coming down, and they rappelled down into that little rock wall canyon as I was like, hanging onto a rock. And that was I was blessed that day, because as I think about that scenario, I think there's a lot of folks that don't survive that, right?
Oh yeah, there have been some really comedic survival ones recently in the last decade, where people have stared death in the face and just caught the right eddy and pulled out on the right rock and being able to sit there, and we've had a good fly day, and we've been able to do a short haul or a winch out.
Okay.
Everything went right in that moment. But for the most part, once you get in the water, you're in the flow, and you're in spring flow, there is nothing going to stop you but the ground. That's where you're going to
Okay.
stop, is when you come off the drop.
Wow. Okay.
So you had a lucky escape.
Yeah. Well, they said, I mean, as they're yanking me out, they're like, "Oh, somebody just died here last week," and I was like, "Okay." Yeah.
It's a good story, though. I mean, have you written that down? Have you written down your experience?
No, I mean, it's not like a, one of those epic things where I'm like flying off the edge and I'm like, one last grab. I grab onto the rock. It's nothing like that. But we have talked about it on our podcast. So it's been chronicled, I guess, a little bit. But I don't think I've ever gotten any feedback on that. That's your reaction is the most feedback I've ever gotten. Typically it's more like, you're lucky or you're an idiot kind of thing. So,
Well, I think there's a move often to judge people very
Right.
quickly and like, oh, you shouldn't have done it. You're stupid. Actually, you're a younger man.
Right.
Younger men exist in risk taking as part of their development.
Right.
99.9% of the time, it's an awesome story. You're okay. And then tragically, there's this small percentage where you don't come back, and somebody lives with that forever. So I work pretty hard to not judge, because my early development, I was out in the fells in cotton, wearing inadequate footwear, doing stuff I probably shouldn't have been doing. But that's the foundation of my outdoor career.
Yeah, and mine too. That was before. I mean, I had not been on a backpacking trip at that point. I had done like 2 big hikes, and that was it. And I was following more experienced guys.
Yeah.
So I appreciate your level of understanding. Looking back on that, I wish I had more wisdom, of course. So,
but you make a good point. You're following other people, and I think there's that one of the things I would love to see out of all of these things is a rediscover of apprenticeship and mentorship. Is that the more experienced people have to help relate how to be safe out there, how to be safer, or the decision-making process to get you into that situation. And I think there's been an erosion of the ability to effectively share how we come to decisions and make appropriately, and I'm going to use the word conservative, safety decisions. So you can come back and tell your own story. It's not that you want somebody else to tell your story.
Yeah, and decisions is one thing. I think if you're talking about like appropriate gear or bringing the proper even clothing for this, like whatever scenario you're doing, at least in our modern age here, there are, you can look at people that we're beyond books now. So you can go to YouTubers who are giving advice and sharing their stories and how they encounter different things and what gear they bring for different places and this and that. So at least most people are generally more prepared, because there wasn't a lot of resources at the time other than like talking to your outdoor store clerk who may or may not actually go outdoors. That was about it for the time period.
And I would also say, hey, there's an over reliance on gear, like, because you've got a great jacket that weighs a few grams and it can deal with this amazing that if you don't know how to read a map, it doesn't really matter. The gear is a tiny proportion of making good decisions out there. And I remember that there's something beautiful about when I was sort of starting the outdoors, where we would just go to an old army surplus store and buy these pants and buy a jacket and buy the boots. And it was really cheap gear, and you would trash it, but it got me from A to B and got me a great resume as far as peak ascents and being out and how many days I was out. Um, and that, again, it gets, when we start talking about gear, I think it can paint an accurate picture about what we're capable of doing. You might have an Everest jacket, but you probably shouldn't be on the Falls Trail tomorrow. You know, it's just branding. Branding doesn't make the summit.
Branding doesn't make the summit. Okay. That's true. That is a good point. Okay. So speaking of all this, what are what's a search and rescue story that you have that's really stuck with you or impacted you the most over the years? Is there one that kind of stands out to you?
Well, I think there's a lot of sad ones that stand out because of the nature of tragedy. I think that there are a few success ones. There was a success one a couple of years ago where an adult went out on a snow hike and disappeared, didn't come back to their car. The companions said, "Hey, she hasn't returned." And it was winter. It was heavy snow. We had a little bit of a storm front come through, and everything pointed to it not being right. And what ended up happening is she did everything right. She got lost. She's like, "Okay, I've got a problem. I'm going to find a tree." She was smaller. She got inside a tree stump. She broke off boughs. She made herself a little nest. She got herself through the night and was discovered the next morning, having rediscovered her compass direction, having her own rescue. And I love that story because if you look at it as a statistic, everything said it was probably going to be negative, but it worked out perfectly, and it was based on her self-reliance. That's what got her through. And I think she was actually a cancer survivor. So she had this deep sense of reliance, potentially, or belief in herself born out of treatment as well, which made it all the more compelling as a story to remember.
Right. If you're lost, I thought that you're just supposed to stay put. Like you said she refigured out where she was, so maybe that makes sense. But generally speaking, is that true?
Yeah, if you're hopelessly lost and you keep walking, trying to get yourself out of it, and you haven't had a pause to reassess and go, "Hang on a minute, what just happened? What's going on here?" Like in snow country, if you get lost and you're out there on your own, you can retrace your steps for the most part.
That's true.
It's pretty easy to track back out. I think in the one we just described, night came and she lost all bearing because she didn't know where the sun was and what the sky was and where the shadows were at. And she just stopped and collected herself. She looked after warmth, food, shelter. And she didn't get herself into that hypothermic state.
Right. Okay. Interesting. We've over the years, we've heard some pretty crazy stories about people getting themselves in unnecessary or ridiculous situations. You know, a lot of them actually are from the Grand Canyon, where people are kind of wheeling suitcases down to the bottom without water, and then they have to get rescued. What are the most common rescues that you found that are unnecessary or ridiculous?
I think people overestimating their ability and underestimating the challenge. So come from sea level from the coast in California and come to Yosemite and try and do Half Dome in a day, and having no idea of that altitude they're going to get to, or carrying inadequate water. That's kind of a reoccurring model. And then there's just sort of ludicrous survival ones that I like. There was a great one with a guy in the backcountry who looks at this big granite peak with a big old ramp going up it and decides to climb it. And as he ascends, he realizes his shoes aren't really working that well. So he takes them off and puts them around his neck. And then he keeps going up, and it's gone from that smooth U floor to the more vertical. And he ends up in a high vertical section, falls twice, and ends up on a small ledge looking outward in a little chimney, and realizes he can either climb up or down, and is like facing death. And at that point, he remembers he has his phone. And so he makes a phone call, and by some quirk, he's in a little bit of a cell pocket and he gets the signal out, but we're really busy. So we have 3 other calls going on. And when it comes into the instant command, he just sort of says, "I'm on a ledge." And we're like, "Oh, we can put that one on a back burner. We don't need to worry about that when he's on a ledge." And they leave it for a while and eventually do an overflight. And he was on a ledge, but it was like 6 inches wide. And he was facing an 1,800-foot drop, and he just stayed there for hours because there wasn't anything he could do. And they inserted a team above him, and they said, we've got one goat grabbing him, and they grabbed him and they got him off of there. And I remember him walking into the IC, and he had the 1,000-yard stare. He had faced death, and he'd come out of it. And there's a picture of him actually with his shoes around his neck and his bare feet. He is, everything could have gone wrong. It didn't. And his judgment was off a little bit at that moment of like what I can do with the summit, but somehow he held it all together and he got through it. You know, the human spirit has deep resilience when it's actually accessed and we choose to recognize it. That's what got him through
amazing.
it. Yeah.
And he obviously didn't panic. He didn't start freaking out, because that would have been possibly enough to send him over the ledge, right?
He'd been total toast. He was standing there for like 3 hours, I think, on the ledge on his heels. Because he had no option. He couldn't sit down on it. He couldn't down climb.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Just getting to that ledge, I imagine, was crazy. Just if sliding down or whatever, that must have been an insane, like,
well, not a
I'm
river.
about to go over.
He fell down a chimney. Like it was dry rock. He's climbing up a peak, and he falls twice to end up on that ledge.
Right. Dang. Okay. But then you said, so you're already dealing with other phone calls. Is this common where you have a day where you're like, okay, we've got 4 rescues or 5 rescues, like this person has to wait, you know, you're basically prioritizing different situations?
Yeah, on a busy day, you might about 3 o'clock, you start to see this ramp up on a busy weekend, and you might have 2 or 3 run like a medical in the valley floor and a couple of pullouts on the trail. But I've been there on a day where we've used every resource, and I'm the last person, and I'm being sent up the Yosemite Falls Trail with a litter pack with nobody else to help me. And they've just said, the instant commanders just said, start walking and we'll find some people and they'll catch you up on the trail. And they did catch me up. And we had like 3 or 4 of us to do a litter carry out high up on the Falls Trail. But they can stack up and you can be triaging.
Dang. Okay. That is crazy. I didn't realize there was that many. So interesting.
Well, 230 calls a year, 8 to 20 deaths a year. A busy year, 20 on that 20 with them. That's medicals of people just passing away on the valley floor, cardiac, and it's just their time. And then you might have 8, 12 trauma, drowning, complications on the trail.
Okay. So what's the most common way people pass away in Yosemite? Is it the cardiac arrest, like elevation, falling, or drowning? What would you say?
Well, in a busy year, like a big snow year, drownings is up there. You could have 3, 4, maybe 5 drownings in a pretty narrow window. And then there's a lot of cardiac action. A lot of times people pushing it out on the trail and coming with an underlying condition, and then a little dehydration and a little stress, a little altitude, all conspire to have a negative.
All right. I got a question about, I mean, as an experienced person, you must just see movies that take place in the wild or the wilderness. And you might, I don't know if you are impressed by them or if you're shaking your head at them, but growing up, one of my favorite movies was Cliffhanger. And in the opening scene with Sylvester Stallone, there's search and rescue rock climbers. They had to set up a Tyrolean traverse between 2 rock towers so that the helicopter has a better landing spot. Is there anything in this scene that could really happen in this kind of search and rescue scenario?
No. because it's just kind of insane, and that's the beauty of it. I actually saw Cliffhanger in Zimbabwe when it first came out. I was living in Southern Africa, yeah, and it's one of the greatest experiences of my life because I went to a cinema. It was in Harare, in the southern part of Zimbabwe, and I'd never been in a cinema where the entire audience participated in the movie in the same way. That moment where the thing fails, people stand in the air and they were screaming and shouting and just going nuts. There's a later piece where he's running to try and get to the edge of something, and people stood up, and the entire audience, hundreds of people, were just shouting, "Run! Run!" It was like the full-on crowd participation. It was one of the greatest entertainment experiences of my life, which makes that movie really special to me because in sort of saying, "Yeah, that will never happen." It's also sort of this balance of like, yeah, but it brought so much joy in that moment. It was so fantastic.
Or one of the parts where, like, I guess he goes under the ice And so now he's like, high altitude, completely submerged
Oh,
in icy water. And the next scene, he's just dry, just kind of sitting there.
oh, it's just it's totally nuts. In fact, just to follow up, the second we had such a good time seeing Cliffhanger. We went
Uh-huh.
back the next night and we saw Jurassic Park.
Oh,
And that
wow.
was equally as fantastic. But it was
Yeah.
a evening show and it was a slightly different crowd. But like, yeah, any of these pieces that sort of with all of these movies that get people excited about the outdoors, if it gets people in the outdoors and then they
Yeah.
discover it's not quite as sort of insane as it looks, but they're in the outdoors, it's a good thing. It's
Right.
like it's 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 just entertainment. The only
Yeah.
shows that really annoy me are like, which I can't watch, are kind of the survivor shows, which have these artificial challenges, because there are local people who live in those environments who deal with these challenges every day with a lot less, and
Right.
they do great. And so
Right.
it's so contrived, I can't enjoy them at all. I can't have I see no value in them at that moment personally for me to
Okay.
watch.
So you're referring to more like Survivor versus shows like Alone, where they're just trying to live off the land. Is that what you're saying?
I think it's interesting. So Alone came on, and my wife watched it, and she really enjoyed it, and she said it's a
Mhm.
fantastic show. It's got all of these elements that you would love. And I watched it for a bit, and again, I'm like, it doesn't, it just doesn't, it doesn't capture my attention. I've been really
Okay.
hungry in the outdoors. Haven't got that level of survivor skill, but I've been
Right.
really hungry for days on end because we had a food drop in Australia where they tipped gasoline all over our food. So the first job we did on a 3 or 4 day resupply was figure out how much food was tainted, and we lost 60-70% of our food. And
Oh,
so
wow.
we headed out with a bunch of teenagers on the river for 3 or 4 days with way too little food to get through it.
Right.
And so I've been sort of in that hardship of trying to manage for a very short amount of time real food deprivation and real challenges with levels of energy and all the associated pieces that come with that. So when it's contrived, I have less patience.
Gotcha.
I was
Okay.
living in the Kalahari and working, and our school ran out of water. It just
Okay.
the well stopped, and we basically took the water out the storage tank. We gave every kid, we had 240 kids in the school, gave them water, we gave them a loaf of bread, and then we sent them back to their villages. And some of these kids
Okay.
were walking 60 kilometers through the desert in their little
Oh
clan
my
groups
gosh.
to get back to the village. That's
Right.
real.
Right.
And we sent them off knowing that the oldest kids would make sure that the youngest kids got to the village.
Okay.
So in that contrived world,
Yeah.
realness, what the world experiences on a daily basis is far more interesting and compelling to me.
Oh, for sure. Versus kind of structured setup there. So you were teaching at a school? So is this in Zimbabwe, or were you in multiple countries in Africa?
I was in Botswana, so that job was it's Botswana is just above South Africa. It's bordered by
Right.
Namibia and then Zimbabwe at the top, and sort of off to the side Mozambique. It doesn't touch Mozambique, and it's the
Okay.
Kalahari Desert. So I'd taken a job there to teach in a school working for the Botswanan government.
How did you
Uh,
find that job? Where does that
uh,
even come up? Like, how are you
there was a
getting recruited for that?
there was a full-page advertisement in the Guardian newspaper in Britain, and I'd come back from the
Okay.
US. I'd run the visa game for a long time, and I needed to do something different. And I just applied, and
Okay.
I was the first person they interviewed. And they said, "How will you do with a remote setting?" And I said, "I'd love it." And they definitely stuck me in a really remote setting. And I spent a year in the southern Kalahari.
Okay. Yikes. That's yeah. Did they get a lot of applicants for that job?
They did actually. I think it's
Okay.
there was a recruitment for qualified teachers, but one of the problems with it is it was a British model in the Botswanan schools to teach a southern African state that probably wasn't best served by that approach. And
Okay.
that was my frustration by the end, was like, oh, actually, I'm actually not part of the solution, I'm a bit of the problem.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And I think that's that other piece that we look at is how do we become part of a solution? And it like the things that we face here in the United States around access to wilderness areas, or how we're conducting ourselves with LNT, all those pieces come down to personal judgment, understanding who and what we are. And the more clarity you have with that, the more chance you have of preserving or actually making good decisions.
Okay. That's interesting. It's tough when, if you're part of, you said you're part of the problem. It's tough when you are part of the system that's the problem and you can't change the system. That's rough. There's not a lot of options at that point, right?
But you can participate. I think that there's a tremendous right now. I look at the outdoor world, and there's a lot of independence of like, I want to be the fastest, I want to do this, I want to do it this way.
Right.
And actually, it's that idea that we model out there really good practice, and we take the time to have an easy conversation with somebody on the trail, not to instantly pass judgment on them, to understand where they came from. They might say, hey, I just threw my trash away because it's my first time out on the trail, I'm having a really good time. You're like, well, what's good about it? And they start talking about it. And then you say a little later, hey, one of the things I find to keep it experience is to really minimize my impact. So I always carry a little bag and I pick up my trash. That's a really different way of going at someone being like, you're breaking it, you're the problem.
If there's one takeaway from our conversation that we're having, is I'm like blown away by how much experience you have, and yet you are just so gracious with how you're viewing like how folks are interacting with the outdoors and the mistakes they're making. You're very understanding. So I appreciate that about you. That's amazing.
But it's the idea, but we have different appreciation. If you look at the Wilderness Act, which is this sort of an amazing piece of legislation in the United States to really guard these crown jewels of our natural environment. What the Wilderness Act does is it has a line that says untrammeled by man, and it completely negates thousands of years of occupation by indigenous and native people who lived in not necessarily harmony, but they lived on that land for eons.
Right.
And so we've come in and we've stamped my idea of what the way to look after them, and it's the way it should be preserved. Why is my idea better than anybody else's? The Wilderness Act in its essence is a good thing because it's our highest level of protection, but we need to revisit how all cultures are made welcome or appreciated in that outdoor setting. And the outdoor industry has not been good at that.
Right. Interesting. Okay, I got a question. Jumping back to like the search and rescue side of things, I got a question about protocols with search and rescue. So you'd think that helicopter rescue that I had back in the 90s was my only experience with Yosemite search and rescue. You'd think, but it was not.
Oh, you're a frequent flyer. This is good. This is really good.
Maybe, they might know me by name. Oh, okay, Carl again.
You're customer number 6. Yeah.
This next one, I was the caller. I wasn't the one that was in trouble, but we set up, you talked about how people are trying to set these backcountry records or whatever. And so a few years ago, back during COVID, we set up a course over Red Peak Pass. Are you familiar with the area?
Yeah.
Okay. And so there's a 50-mile loop. You start kind of near Glacier Point, and there's a 50-mile loop that we were setting up, and we had backpacked that section. I think we did it, when we were younger in 3 days, and then 10 years later we did it in 4 days. And I was like, let's try to do this in 1 day. Let's try to make this happen. And so we trained for it, and I was kind of the guy leading the charge, and I ended up getting hurt to the point where I couldn't participate. But the other 2 guys that wanted to go were like, well, we still want to do this. And I was like, all right, great. So they weren't typically trip leaders, and so they weren't good, as you mentioned earlier, with like the map and the compass and this and that. And there's some other tools that we could have had with us that would have made it safer. But they took off. They didn't have a locator beacon, and I was there just kind of as support, just at the trailhead, making sure they were okay at the beginning, at the end. And they were kind of due back towards midnight of that day, maybe a little bit earlier, and they didn't turn up. And by 6 a.m., they still didn't turn up the following day. And so I waited, I want to say, I don't know, 4 more hours before calling search and rescue and saying, look, these guys are like, in my mind, at least, they're way overdue. And so here's my question about the protocol is, so I call up, and I think you just called 911 in Yosemite. Is that right?
Yeah, and it ends up in a dispatch center, and then it comes back to whatever the IC is. Maybe you might get hold of somebody in SAR.
Okay. So I call, and so they're asking all the questions, like what clothes are they wearing? What do they look like? What are their ages? Whereabouts were they supposed to be? So I go through like a 5-minute questionnaire on the phone with them, and they're like, okay, great. We got all this down. We're going to pass you on to whatever the next level is. So I get to the second level, and that person that I'm on the phone with asks literally the exact same questions. Okay. They pass me on to a third person who asks me again the same questions. And so at this point, I'm not like freaking out because I don't think my friends are like dead or anything, but I want them to jump into action, and they're just asking the same questions over and over again. So I'm getting a little frustrated here. So what is that? Like what just happened to me with 3 people asking the same questions?
So you're probably in 3 different locations. So the dispatch center is actually typing that stuff into a report, right? They're sort of saying, okay, so that computer system doesn't work in remote settings. So they haven't got a link into that. So what's happening is the dispatch person is run at the incident commander, who's ever's on, and read off the sheet and said, okay, this is what we've got. And they go, okay, here's the number. And the person goes, all right, I've got a rough idea. Let me make that call. So they end up talking to you, and they go, so what's happening? And they're essentially they're figuring stuff out, and they go, oh, you know what? This is in a different district. This is in Southern District in Wawona. So what we're going to do is we're going to run it out of there. So we'll get another IC on who's more local and got better coverage, and we'll transfer it down to Wawona. So you get the third person who's now saying, hey, tell me again what's going on. It's because we don't have high-tech computers. We don't have all of those pieces to have the same information related. And it's also a time to cross-reference because you're also looking for inconsistencies.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So if I'm talking to someone, I might ask the same questions 2 or 3 times because I want to double check I've got it right and I haven't misheard anything. And I want to make sure when I pass it on, I'm 100% sure what's going on.
Okay. So if you do hear inconsistencies, you're obviously going to follow up and say, okay, well, you said this at first, and then you said this now you're saying this. So which did you just say, like, so which one of these is correct, or how do you?
So here's a good one. So we have a college group who reports somebody missing after like 6 or 8 hours.
Right.
And they start digging down on that college group and say, hang on a minute, have they been missing 6 or 8 hours? And they start to fudge it a little bit. Well, they've been missing for 24 hours. You know why they're not talking about it? Because he was tripping. He was on, the person who disappeared was on drugs, and they were scared to be truthful. So they held back from that actually complicated the response. Because instead of coming in and saying 6 to 8 hours, hang on a minute, it's good weather. They kind of they've got some clothes on. We're now dealing with someone who's been gone for 24 hours who was under the influence. That's a very different response.
Right. Okay. That's interesting. So I guess that makes sense. I feel like my stories were the same. The response was basically like, we'll check to see if they've turned up at the trailhead, but it was a very slow, like, we got to wait till they're missing longer type of response, which in the moment I was like, I was, I guess, surprised by it. Not that I was expecting like helicopter to go searching for them, but then after the fact, when they eventually did turn up and they just had taken the wrong trail and, basically they just gotten lost, but not like lost off trail or anything. It all made sense, like how the turnout, but the protocol at first was the surprising part, I guess.
But it also is down to time. Like if you get a call at 4 o'clock in the afternoon for Red Peak Pass and a southern flight, and there's a fire on the north end, and we have 1 helicopter that's running that, and they're actually dealing with an emergency out of Hetch Hetchy, then and it's been stable weather system. Your friends have really good equipment. They're on a relatively open terrain. It's the Illilouette Basin's been pretty burnt. It's burnt out. It's got pretty good visibility. You can look up and see Half Dome. There are lots of reasons to have optimism at that moment. And so they come down as far as like, oh, if we're going to respond, and we're not going to really look at it until the morning because we can't put anybody on the ground out there anyway until mid-morning with a helicopter flight.
Right. Okay.
So that
Fair
a
enough.
lot of times you see people wanting instantaneous action. Hey, we got a cardiac. It's up here at Merced Lake. It's going to take an hour, maybe 40 minutes. You might get lucky with a
Right.
helicopter. It's in the air and you redirect, but it's hours to get response in.
Okay. Well, this is good information for the next time I call search and rescue, so I'll be prepared.
You should say your frequent customer card and say, I've done this before, I believe. On the third one, I qualify for free donuts and coffee. And they'll be like, absolutely, sir.
Well, we went back last summer, so this is in August, and we tried it again and this time I wasn't hurt, and I just was with one of the buddies, decided to do it again. But if you remember last summer, that was the one that was a big snow year, right? So even in August, on the north side of Red Peak Pass, there's just covered in August, and so I was like, so as we're ascending the south side and experiencing snow, I'm like, the north side's gonna be way worse. We didn't know what it looked like on that side of it. I was like, oh, we might be calling again because we're not in a good situation again. So kind of funny, but it all worked out.
Which is that I think if you're on that repeat cycle, there's a good chance that you should just stop and go, hang on a minute. What is the consistent piece in this adventure? And the consistent piece is you. And so yeah, look at that and go, hang on a minute. Is there something I can learn from these experiences? Which is why I think writing about it's a good thing, is that myth is a really important thing. Storytelling is a really important thing, because that in truth, it's a lost art because we've taken it down to 15 seconds on TikTok or Instagram. And actually the best stuff's around a campfire at night, and you're just hearing the most ludicrous stories, and people have come through it, but you've shared this sort of professional incompetence. There's those things that you've done on a personal level and gone, oh, and you know what, it's not going to happen again. And you've shared it. It's a lesson.
Yeah. I think through the way I've told the story, it does sound like I'm the consistent piece here, but in the end, I've had one rescue when I was 19 years old before I was experienced. So the rest were I was involved, I guess, but not needing.
You're a bit player in it. You were in the sort of production team. Yeah.
Correct. Okay. So we did bring with us a locator beacon, and we're on that train now. And so we had that with us on our last trip, and we bring that with us on our backpacking trips now. What's your opinion of the increasing use of locator beacons in the backcountry?
I think they're great if they give people a little bit more confidence to go out there and say, oh, I've got this sort of standby thing. I think then it remains to be seen if all the times that people push are, and I use this word careful, worthy, that they've heard a loud noise and they panic and they push it, and that's just being in the outdoors, the loud noises. But I'm not incredibly anti them. Do you remember the early ones, the ones that came out? You could have messages on them. You could like text messages. And we had those. Yeah, we had somebody who'd like sent a message on top of this peak. They're out on the crest, and I'm experiencing shortness of breath and racing heartbeat. And we're like, okay, we're on our way, and the helicopter's sort of gearing up, and then takes a while to get the helicopter out there. And during that time, we get another message, which is, actually, I'm feeling much better. I can now breathe, and my heart has slowed down. And then a little while later, we get another message, which is, actually, I think I'm having a heart attack again. And actually what had happened on their GPS is they'd been on a summit and they'd gone down to a lower point and they go back. And what they were experiencing was the effect of altitude. It wasn't a cardiac. They were just experiencing altitude. But in that loneliness, that isolation, they jumped. I've got a full-on cardiac. I need the team out here to zap me. Yeah. But that's the only one that sort of stands out in my mind as being a little bit like, hang on a minute.
Okay. So were you able to message back, like, just get to lower elevation, stay there?
I can't remember how that one worked out, actually. There was quite a lot going on, I think, that day. But it provided some merriment as we realized what it was.
Merriment. Okay. That's funny. I know that we did an episode, I think it was last fall, where Garmin reported out, and Garmin's just one of the brands that makes these beacons, but they reported out that they've now done they had 10,000 calls as of like last year, I want to say. And so I was like, 10,000 that's so many. And I mean, I just imagine that number is just going to continue to increase as more people are using the backcountry and then actually buying these beacons. So that's why I was just curious what your opinion was. So
it would be interesting to look at that breakdown as well over users and see how much of it is the sort of backpack crew through to rural communities where they've used it because they're going on a fishing trip in a remote river in Alaska, and like what that breakdown is. Because I think I think we would find that the backpacker group is a smaller percentage of a much larger user group.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I know people have used them even just driving around. They get in a car accident in a remote place. They've used it for something like that. Yeah, that's a good point. So, and speaking of that, so we're gonna put this out this week, but you shared with me a video clip of a training session, swiftwater training, where you're just jumping into the Merced River, into the rapids. Is that from this year?
Yeah, that's from this month. So we trained April and May this year. We normally were training in March, but it's pretty cold. And that video I shared was day one. It's the first long swim that people on the class are going to do. They're going to swim about quarter to half a mile, and it's full
in the river.
Spring float. Yeah, full spring float flows, and they're going to swim in pairs. And we're teaching them the ferry angle and how to not tire themselves out and regulate their breathing. And they're just going to keep swimming down that stretch.
Okay. Wow. All right. Yeah. So that we'll have that out here in a couple of days, but that was an impressive shot for sure. Just kind of just lining up and just jumping into the swift water. So that was
and
cool.
We've got really good safety. We're running with, I think that group was maybe 10 or 12 people, and we had 3 instructors. We had an instructor come in from Zion National Park, and then we had a ranger who's an instructor from Yosemite. And so we had 3 of us who were all competent in the water to cover the safety.
Wow. All right. Well, that was impressive to me. So, and yeah, everything that your kind of general view and attitude towards just search and rescue and adventure in general, really appreciate it. So we always save our last question for you. How can people find you or follow you? Or is there anything you'd like to share, anything you'd like to promote, or anything you got going on?
You can get a hold of me at www.moosemutlow.com. And that's a website where my training and my books are. I have a couple of books out. I have a book really specifically about a component of search and rescue, which is called When Accidents Happen. It looks at the role of the family liaison officer in working in crisis communication. And I have a book called Searching, which is finding purpose, laughter, and distraction through search and rescue, which is more of a biography of missions I've been on and the impacts of that long-term exposure to trauma.
Okay, wow.
And I'm on the Instagram as well. I'm at Moose Mutlow on the Instagram. So
we'll have links for those in our show description, so you can just click right on that. And Moose, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for coming on our show. This has been an honor and a pleasure, sir.
Well, thank you very much. And next time you're in Yosemite, please give me a shout so we can give a heads up to search and rescue that you're around, because it sounds like that could be a good investment of time. No, thank you very much. I've enjoyed it.
All right. So what you think about that?
I mean, great guy. First of all, you can tell he's just a well of it makes you curious to know more about that guy. I'm curious though about the comment he made about you being kind of like the common denominator in all the precarious circumstances. You know, what do you feel about that?
I mean, he said it with a laugh, but I think he's like, actually,
he's like, well,
maybe you're the problem.
Double take. You organized this trip.
Yeah.
I mean, do you take that personally? I mean,
I don't know. Well, who's
shots fired by Moose? I mean,
kind of.
You know?
Well, let me throw it to you though. Like, who's responsible? Let's say that we go on a backpacking trip, and not either of us, but somebody that we invited along, first time going, like follows us down the trail and gets in trouble and gets hurt. Is that our fault or is that their fault?
First, I think it's more our fault.
Okay.
I think part of that's our fault.
Yeah. And so the first scenario, I was following more experienced people and I didn't know what I was doing. I was like a newbie. So, there you go. You just defended me. Thank you.
You get some, I know you like to trap people, but there's been other times where we are later at the trip, or you, or whatever you want to call it. And something goes awry. So
we've taken full ownership of all those. What about the second scenario
a lot of
was
common
when
denominators.
when Rocky and Jared got lost in Yosemite. Like neither of us were on that trip, and they chose to go, even though I had to bail for injury purposes. That was their decision to go. They've been on a bunch of backpacking trips. They've read maps. Whose fault was that? Was that my fault still?
I'm gonna say like 80% you. Like, do you pull the plug? Do you pull the plug knowing they're gonna have trouble reading the map? I mean, you just feel like, guys, I don't think you should. Did you at any point? Let me ask you this: did you at any point? I forgot how this went. Did you at any point say like, guys, I don't think this is a good idea without me? Maybe you didn't say it like that, but
that sounds very arrogant.
You
need me. You need me
without me. I am the map reader. I am the Gandalf. Like, did you go that like? No. But in all seriousness, did you ever say like, no, I don't think this is a good idea. I don't think we should do this trip. If you guys aren't comfortable reading the map,
they're adults. I left it up to them. No,
you went in, right. You shrugged off the responsibility. It's fine. You kind of went the whole thing of like, you're just going to make a left and then another left and then another left. Just stay left and keep left.
Right.
And you thought that they would be okay with that.
Yeah. And they had done the trip before, and Rocky had done the trip twice. So for those who haven't been following our show, this is a trip back in 2020 where we had to call search and rescue to find them. I think I referenced that in the interview.
And I love Rocky. I love Jared. They know this. But let's be factual for a minute. Like, who's better if he's done it twice? Who seems to be like, you are very familiar with all these trails and mapping them out and like knowing the turns and all blah, blah, blah. Who's gonna forget more likely where to go, even though you told him where to go? Rocky or you? Like, you're gonna, if you went out there without a map, you'd know where to go. Because
there's a couple confusing spots in all seriousness. But
you just proved my point.
But you're still on a trail. It's not like you're lost in the wild and you're trying to like kill deer to eat and stuff. It's not like that. So,
well,
all that's to say, the third scenario where I pointed out that I was at the top of Red Peak Pass and that the north side was covered in snow and I knew it was gonna be dangerous. Like, that's 100% on me. So that one I can definitely take full ownership of.
As long as you sent these grown men out and felt in your heart, you're like, you know what? They are fully trained and equipped to succeed in this mission.
Yeah.
With what I gave them.
I guess I'm not so arrogant to think that I'm sending them out. I just think they're adults who are making decisions themselves.
You're allowing them to go. With you sent them out there with a map that said left. Sent them out there with like a left, and then left. You'll be there. That was it. That's what you sent them out with. And an emergency blanket. My bad. My gosh. It's no wonder these men even came back alive with all 10 toes. You know what I mean? Jeez.
Your synopsis of the story is like me saying like, Thanos is just looking for some shiny rocks to put on a glove so that he can like destroy people.
That's even better than what you did. I mean, geez, I don't know.
That's the same thing. Anyway, so the Lord of the Rings reference that we brought up, that first question I asked about,
let's talk about that.
So the first question I asked him about, like my chances of survival as I'm flowing down Yosemite Falls, I guess that middle fall section is literally called Middle Earth. So,
is it really?
So I almost died in Middle Earth.
That would have been pretty. If you're gonna go, I mean, that's pretty cool way to do it.
That's a good spot. All right. Yeah.
You died in Middle Earth.
Good for thought.
Okay.
Cliffhanger story. That was my favorite moments of the interview, was when he talked about how he was in Africa and people were like yelling at the movie screen as he's watching Cliffhanger, but that sadly nothing was accurate in that movie. So,
no, dude, so much cheesy stuff. That's what made it great, though.
That's
what made it great.
I know. So
it's like, it's cheesy, but I love it.
So spoiler alert for those who haven't seen that 90s movie. Okay, so one of the stories he shared though was about I don't remember if he said a man or woman who had a fake heart condition where they called for help when they were at elevation, then they descended, they're feeling better, then they decide to climb another mountain peak, now they have a heart condition again. Derek, if you're on that call, man, like, how do you handle that? What do you say?
I mean, I'd want to talk to the person myself. That's a tricky one too.
Let's role play. I'm calling in. It's one of those like old, or I guess I'm texting in.
This is why I'm not search and rescue. I don't want to do this.
You don't want to role play?
No, I'll role play. I don't in real life though. This would be kind of awkward because people. We've talked about this. We did a whole episode on this about how many more button pushes are on the map of the SAR, right? And USA had like 1 billion more than everybody else. So why? Because we're a little more high maintenance.
Yeah.
Here we go. This could be a perfect example.
Let's you're sidestepping. Role play. I'm texting you. I say, I'm at the top of a mountain. I am dying. Come save me.
What
do you say?
I am dying. I'll be like, do you have a priest with you? Do you want to pray about it? Or no, I would say what
Priest.
Last Supper up there, make it a good one. I
Okay.
don't know. I'd say it's kind of like 911. You just be like, well, what are you feeling? What's going on? What
My heart is racing. I can't catch my breath. I am dying. Say goodbye to my kids for me.
Well, if you feel like it's that late, God bless you. No. Are they able to move? Are you able to move or are you able to stand? Are you able to walk downhill?
No response for a while. And then 20 minutes later, I text you again. Actually, I'm feeling fine right now. No problem. No need to come.
You sound like a hypochondriac. Have a good trip. That's what I mean.
Okay. 20 minutes later, I'm dying again. I'm dying. Heart's hurting again. I'm back. Like I'm on top of a mountain. Like,
I'd say
do you get how ridiculous this is?
I'd be like, backtrack 20 minutes and call me and tell me how you feel, where you were before when you felt great.
Unreal, man. Unreal.
That's tough, man. That's really tough.
And honestly, that's probably exactly how it happened, is that exact role play. So there you go.
I mean, here's a funny side story of something similar. I don't know if you guys, maybe a lot of people know that the comedian Jim Gaffigan, he was on a hike with his family and his appendix had ruptured. But at the time he's like, ouch, this just really hurts in my stomach. So when he's getting on the chopper, all he's thinking to himself is just like, I hope, like as the chopper's coming, he's like, I hope this is like a legit problem. I hope it's just not like indigestion or something ridiculous.
Right.
I'm going to feel dumb. I'm going to feel horrible. And I'm going to have to pay for this dumb chopper. So it ended up being a serious matter. I don't want to say thankfully, but like,
thankfully it was serious.
Thankfully, he almost died, but he lived. And but could you imagine if it was just like a gnarly indigestion and you're like, the guys are like, yeah,
who knows? Like if you have weird stuff happening to your body at high elevation, like you can't always self-diagose. So who knows, man?
You can't.
Yeah. Hey, thanks to Moose Mutlow. Like really enjoyed it. Hope to have him back on. I guess last thoughts that I want to say is I can't remember if this came up in the interview because we talked for a while afterwards. He decided to go look for the file that had my search and rescue from like the 90s. He wants to actually find the file and see what it says on there. And so he's not looking on like some old computer. He's looking literally in file cabinets and he's still in process. So yeah,
stay tuned.
Stay tuned.
That's pretty cool. Wow.
Yeah.
Can he also see if about your, when you got flagged by Ranger Annie, can he check that out? Is he able to access
He's not a ranger, man. He's just a
maybe he knows people. He could figure it out.
He does. I'll ask him, maybe. Yeah.
See what the severity of that was.
We got search and rescue trivia coming up right after this. All right, my friend. I got 7 losses. You got 6. We've got 3 episodes for the season where we're counting the trivia, including this one. So yeah, we've got, we'll see how you do, man. Here we go.
I guess so.
Search and rescue trivia. These are all multiple choice.
Oh, thank you, Lord. Okay, here we go.
Number 1. Okay. The National Hug a Tree program teaches kids program, A, to leave no trace and value the environment, B, they put if you're lost, or C, to bond with nature by embracing it with skin contact. Sorry, there's also D, to practice giving good hugs on inanimate objects.
What's the third one? Bond with skin?
Bond with nature by embracing it with skin contact, like bare feet to the ground kind of thing, or physically hugging a tree with your skin kind of a thing.
No trace, stay where you are. Bond skin with the ground. Awkward. And then
to practice giving good hugs on
inanimate objects. Which one's fake? Which one's fake?
No, which one does the National Hug a Tree program teach kids?
Oh. This is so stupid. I don't even know this one at all. Hug an inanimate object. That sounds. I know people who've done that. I'm gonna say, if you came up with this is super awkward. I'm gonna say the Bond skin. Sounds so weird.
To bond with nature by embracing it with skin contact. I came up with that one for sure.
Yeah.
All right. I would like to go back to the name of the trivia, which is search and rescue trivia.
Stay where you are.
To stay put where you're lost. Did not use the clue.
I didn't use the clue.
I'm actually good at that.
I like to come from behind today. It's fine.
Yeah. Well, if anybody can do it, you can. All right, number 2. The Yosemite Search and Rescue Program is looking for people with certain skills as outlined on the National Park Service website.
Okay.
Which of the following is one of them? They like literally list out skills like with commas and stuff. Which of them is literally on their list? A, strong
Skills.
hiking ability. B, knot tying. C, rock climbing. D, strong swimming ability.
Okay, strong hiking seems general. Knot tying.
Right.
Rock climbing. Okay, that rock climbing seems legit. I want the one that's on there, you said? Or that's actually,
it's actually
on the list?
And then there's strong swimming ability.
I mean, these all seem kind of like important. Like if you're going to rescue somebody, you got to know how to tell knots.
Yeah.
Rock climb, strong hiker? Seems
Strong
kinda,
hiking ability.
Hiking
Like
ability
when because they don't always do
general.
helicopter rescues. They hike in and they put people on gurneys.
Swimming. We'll go swimming.
Swimming. That one, in my opinion, would make sense, but it's not. It's rock climbing, buddy. You have lost the trivia. We are tied again, and I'm pumped. I'm pumped about this.
It doesn't matter. Even if I lose trivia, you still have to do the trivia you didn't do last year.
I know you're hung up on that. I got you, man. I got you.
Hung up or just trying to follow through and keep you accountable.
Yeah. Why is strong swimming not on the list? Because like Moose literally sent me a video, which I'll have out this week, where they're training with swiftwater rescue and they dive into like a swollen Merced River and he swims like 2 miles down this like fast moving river.
All of these seem like they should be on there. Not tying's not on there?
Yeah, so I think that the website is faulty.
Are all of those on there?
No, the only one that's on there is rock climbing.
That's knot tying seems kind of important.
Yeah, you think that would probably go with rock climbing though, right? And you think like you should be really fit. If you have to hike in and then hike out holding a person, you'd think you'd have to be really fit, right?
That's, maybe time for an edit. Time for an edit. Go ahead.
Yosemite folks, maybe update your website and take me off the blacklist, please. Thank you. All right, number 3. What activity is the most common search and rescue phone call about? A, hiking. B, boating. C, backcountry skiing. D, rock climbing. Or E, shin pain leading to broken trekking poles.
Hilarious. I like the E.
Thank you.
I'm going to go with what was the first one? Hiking?
Hiking.
What was it? Hiking?
Hiking.
I'll just go hiking. It's probably wrong, though.
Hiking is correct.
Yes!
Salvaging one. Yeah, it was like hiking, then boating. It was like literally in order. And a distant fifth was the shin pain, but that was actually on the list there.
Really?
No, it wasn't actually. Sorry.
I didn't think so. Seemed a little suspect.
All right. Pretty suspect.
Pretty
okay. So we're tied 7-7. We got 2 left. You got 1. I got 1. We'll see how it shakes out. But hey, my friend, we got a bunch of new reviews. We remember how we asked for them, and we said, if we get to 300, that we'll send them like a random gear package.
Right.
There's too many to go through, but my favorite one was called "Decent Job." Not bad at all. Keep it up, Derek and Carl. Just thanks. Decent. That's kind of sums up my life right there.
Adequate.
So, yeah. Pintail 42. Then we have Pops from Kentucky, 5 stars all day long. We got Ben, great show. Thanks, Ben. He's joining the Backpacking Blisters Bible study. And then Broing Out with, and then it kind of went Backpacking and Blisters, Adventure Eddie, and then immediate follow by HT2919. We had like all these reviews here. And then 5 out of 5 from Coach Chris 54. So all of you qualified for Backpacking and Blisters stickers. So please send me your address. But it was HT2919 that hit the 300th review. So thank you so much. Send me your address to get a random prize package from our random bonus box coming your way.
Don't give them the aqua clip. All right.
Yeah.
Anything else? That's it?
That's all I got.
No tidbits? That's it? Guys.
That was a tidbit, literally.
No more? Okay.
I mean, I got more if you want more.
No, I don't want any more, please.
Okay.
Thank you guys for listening. Hope you enjoyed Moose as we did. We will see you next time, guys. Remember, if you need to check out Middle Earth, just go where Carl fell and almost killed himself. We will see you